time. Right on. So for introductions, well, I'm Rob of Drift Outfitters and Fly Shop. I'm the owner, operator, stock boy, floor washer, all those things. We do all the jobs around the shop. We share them all. Matt Martin is a great friend of the shop. He's one of our pro fly tires. He's a guide this year as well. Started guiding this season or last fall, I believe.
Yeah, last fall.
Yeah. Last fall, and yeah, he's been a sort of a hit off the bat. So Matt's knowledge in fly fishing goes back some ways. He was a guide. Where'd you guide before? You were up in north for muskie and pike as well.
Yeah, I spent every year through college and university guiding on Lake of the Woods. I did that for 7 years. Yeah, 7 years.
Yeah.
So, good time up there. Completely different than the fishery down here, but big pike.
Yeah. But you've been in business for a while, so you know what you're doing. Your expertise is definitely there for multi-species, and for your guiding, you focus on, I guess, this time of year, steelhead. Wrapped up as well. So yeah, that was kind of in the books and off the books for now. Yeah.
We kicked off the steelhead season this past Saturday. So had a trip on Saturday, had another trip on Sunday, and then got a couple more this week. Really looking forward to it. Steelhead are great this time of year. They're super fun. They're super, when you do find them, they tend to be some of the most aggressive fish of the year. They're super acrobatic and full of runs, just an overall good time. So, the best part is a lot of people don't really know they're in yet. Traffic isn't insane on the rivers, which is, usually late September after, the first big rain. One of the main rivers I guide on, the Big Head, it blew out. It was flowing at 75 cubic meters per second when normally I fish that in around 4 to 8 cubic meters per second. So I had that first big blowout, and then all of a sudden there were the fish. They were up there. So yeah,
it's fantastic. Yeah, and these temperatures are fantastic for fish too. It's not too warm. Daytimes are not too hot. Though, and cold water coming through. And it's amazing having this water now. The Big Head, I really look at it as a November and December fishery, because that's when it retains a lot of water in the aquifer around there. So if higher water flows, get more rains. So having this river come online in October is fantastic. It really is almost unheard of in my aspect of my thoughts, which is brilliant. The Maitlands has lots of water too. Chris was on the water today floating down. So if anyone's looking to get out this weekend, there is lots of water. There's good water. The Grand's going to be in shape for the weekend as well. So as a little report for you guys to get going and thinking about, go outside, get on the water if you can. I know it's the Thanksgiving weekend family stuff, but if you can sneak away for an afternoon or a day, please get out there. You're not going to get these temperatures and these conditions for much longer. It's going to get colder. It won't be fair weather fishing for much longer, put it that way.
Definitely.
Right on.
Cool.
So, right on. Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Jump into it. So today I'm going to go over 3 of my favorite guide patterns. Their guide patterns are awesome because they're great patterns that teach and instruct new fly tires. They're simple, they're fast, they're effective. You lose a lot of flies out there when you're guiding, some days more than others, and you want to be able to refill your box or boxes that night when you get home for your next trip. So most of the patterns, they don't take more than a minute or 2 to tie. As a beginner, that's really nice. They're not complicated. They're basically basic skills that you will be using over and over again in any pattern you tie for a multitude of species. The materials are readily available. You don't have to spend a lot of money. I'm just as guilty as any fly tire. I got, I don't know how many thousands of dollars of material sitting around that doesn't get used as much as some of my other stuff. But just getting started out, you can grab a handful of the materials that we included in the advertisement for this event, and you'll be tying 3 very effective steelhead patterns for the Great Lakes steelhead or rainbow trout. So the first one we're going to go over, I'll bring my camera closer when we start tying. I'm going to start off with a sucker spawn pattern. A lot of people think of the sucker spawn as a true imitation of sucker eggs, and that is true. However, suckers do only spawn in the spring. This also represents, in my opinion, a chunk of rainbow trout or salmon eggs floating down the river. A lot of people, conventional anglers, do very well on roe eggs and whatnot, and this imitates that extremely well. Single eggs work very well, but when the water gets a little colored, having a little bit of size to it with the sucker spawn and the iridescence that the McFly foam and translucence that allows you to tie really helps it stand out. And I think I can't count how many times I've been out with friends or clients, and someone's fishing a pool with a center pin with worms or eggs or whatever, and they move on, and I'm like, okay, let's go fish it. And they're like, well, no, like, why would we? They're in there with eggs. And I always say sometimes you just got to show them something different. And the amount of times that you pull a fish out of there that's never seen a fly or seen something other than a roe bag, and you get a couple of, which is always a fun little experience for people. So the materials for this fly are really straightforward. We're going to start out with thread. Pick up some 8/0 Vivus thread to match the pattern, the rough color of the pattern. So in this sense, I'm going to do a 2-color sucker spawn fly. I'm going to use orange thread. That'll help it blend. It'll actually sometimes even contrast is a good thing, but I like to match it as close as possible. For the tail, for the hook, you can do curves, caddis hooks, egg hooks, whatever. I like when it's a little bit different. I like using a nymph sprout hook, mustad size 10, size 12. I like that. This is also a 2x heavy or 3x heavy, so it's going to stand up to the abuse of a potentially 10-pound fish. If you get in there with a standard trout nymph hook, you will pull some fish off for sure. You will have to play them a little lighter, but I like the power behind these hooks, and the density behind it. It helps it sink a little more, maybe float a little more natural. Like fly foam is very buoyant, so having something that kind of neutralizes that buoyancy is nice. So yeah, and then for the tail, a lot of people don't throw a tail on sucker spawn patterns, but I find a little bit of crystal flash, and again in a color that complements or matches, just adds that little bit of shine. If you ever find salmon eggs laying along the bank, or you see someone fishing a roe bag, take a look at them. They have quite a bit of shine. That shell's got some sheen to it. I think it helps catch their eyes. And then for the rest of the fly, it's just a smattering of different McFly foam colors. I would say I've had this color question a lot. What colors work best? I'm a big fan of anything that's kind of an egg color. So like the yolk, egg yolk, McCheese, Steelhead orange, and the apricot are 3 of my favorite. But I really like white as well. And hey, chartreuse, extremely bright orange. They're all good colors. And that brings me to a point too. Bring lots of different colors of egg patterns. Don't focus on just having one color in your box. Different water conditions and in fact time of year can impact what color egg you should fish. So yeah, it's really a thread, flash, and foam or yarn fly. Really simple, but it's the technique. Instead of just spinning it on your hook like a glow bug, I think confuses some people. So I'm going to move my tripod down, and sorry if I make anybody dizzy doing that, but we're going to try to get it set here. And shout out with any questions as we go. All right. Hopefully I can get it somewhat in focus here. That looks all right, eh?
Not bad there. Yeah.
So this is it basically right here. You'll notice it kind of has, even though they're just tied in loops, it kind of represents many small eggs tied along the shank of the hook. You'll notice the bottom of the fly has all the thread wraps, which is why we use a matching color for it to blend in. And then just that short little tail of crystal flash. So we'll get into it. All right. So make sure you adjust your vise to each hook. As a beginner, when I was learning, I've definitely underclamped and overclamped many hooks. The great thing with underclamping is you realize pretty quickly that it's loose. Overclamping, you don't really find out until you hook a fish and the hook can break. So make sure it's just easy to press your lever or whatever vise you're using. It's not too hard, but when you give it a good flick, it's staying put. You don't want that moving around on you. To start this fly, like I said, we're going to start with an 8/0 Vivus thread. Vivus is one of my favorite threads with the way it's braided together. It's incredibly strong for its thickness, even down into the really small, like 14/0 stuff I tie dry flies with. I don't like to jinx it, but it's hard to break compared to some other brands on the market, which is nice. So I'm going to start it just behind the hook eye, and we're going to give ourselves 3 or 4 wraps quickly just to cover that. Give it a good down pull so your thread base is seated, and wrap all the way to the point of the hook. or just behind the point of the hook. And if you need me to slow down at any time, if anybody needs to catch up, just send a message in the box and I can go over steps at any time. We're going to trim that tag end nice and close to the thread base. You're going to pick up your hank of crystal flash. You're going to take off maybe 4 or 5 pieces. Yeah, maybe 4 pieces. Cut that off and you'll have a pretty long piece in your hands. I usually do this and then I'll process many flies at one time. This is 4 or 5 inches, but you're going to tie it in maybe an inch behind the hook bend with a couple. Just throw your loose wrap over top because you have all this material. It's kind of in the way. And throw a second and a third. And then what I do to get a little bit more flashback there is I just grab the tips, fold them back, and then do 3 or 4 wraps back again. It's important with this pattern to not crowd the hook bend too much. We want to make sure the fly is tied on top of the hook. That ensures you have the best hookup ratio possible when the fish does decide to eat. So you got all this excess material back here. I'm just going to trim that short. Maybe it's really just behind the hook bend, maybe a total of like a 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch. Not much. You can see there. It's pretty short. That doesn't take a lot of flash for it to really stand out in the water. Then when it comes to prepping your yarn, your McFly foam, really I almost always use a bicolor pattern. I like the color it provides, the translucency of the material. I think it provides like an inner and a shell color, which is kind of cool. But also in the end, I don't think it's too important. So don't get hung up on it if only one is working. Generally speaking, it's either something bright is working, something like completely crazy color is working, or something supernatural is working. We're going to start out. I'm just going to use the apricot McFly foam and the steelhead orange. So 2 orange colors, but they work well together and they contrast a little bit. But you choose to use whatever colors you have on you. So McFly foam is interesting material. If you have any dry skin or whatever, it sticks to you really well. So you kind of want to pull it and unfold it. It turns into this reverse there. Turns into this like a hank kind of like yarn. You can pull it apart and there's like natural segmentations to it when you start pulling it, as you can see there. Basically what you're going to do is find one of those and find one that's pretty, I would say maybe the thickness of like, half a pencil. When it's there, it's not super thick. You don't want to tie this too bulky. When you pull it tight to tie it in, it'll shrink down quite a bit. When you loosen it, it'll double up or triple up in size. If you tie it in too big, you also have issues with the fly sinking and getting down in time. So you want to consider the sparseness of the pattern. Then you're just going to pull and pull, and it'll come out. And it also is a great material for glow bugs. It's my favorite for glow bugs. Just flares really well. All right, so then I'm going to take off a section about 6 or 7 inches, because again, I like to tie a bunch in a row. So I clip that, just put it up on my leg, on my lap for now. But yeah, that's what we're living with. Then I'm going to take an orange one, same kind of thing. Find the end, pull on it, get out of there. All right. So 2 colors is standard. Some people use 3 single solo colors, doesn't seem to matter. But what you'll be left with is these 2. Let's see it very well. Hard with the glare. There's a light color, darker color. You pull them alongside each other, get them nice and tight. Try to get the ends close, but your best bet is to just pinch them together in your index and thumb and trim them as square as possible. And that'll give you a nice clean edge to work with. At this point, you're going to start tying in the fly at the back of the hook. Give yourself like a little bit of room to work with. It can be a little funky to work with, but the good thing is this material is nice and affordable, so you can throw a little bit off to the side. It's not a big deal. So put that on top of the hook shank, very key, and you don't want to spin it. Unlike spinning deer hair, where you're going to end up with 2 loose wraps and then pull tight and let go at this kind of same time. This we want to hold down with 2 loose wraps, and then you're going to pull directly down on your bobbin And for new fly tyers, that's pulling directly down is super important. If you pull with your bobbin like this, you'll often just break your thread. So pulling in direct line is important, followed by another 2 and a nice direct pull. Now that material is anchored on there, I'm just going to trim that little ball off there. And then we're going to try to just clean it up a little bit, just to make sure it's in place. So that's just a handful of wraps. Clean it up. I like to get as much air out of it as possible. Like I said, this material is quite buoyant, so getting it nice and tight. And it also keeps it, makes a more durable fly. So now we're at this stage. What we want to do is we're going to basically have the thread move forward from the tie-in point, maybe 3 turns. That's going to allow for the first loop. And there's a couple of ways you can do this. One of them is just with your fingers. A very quick, speedy way to do it is to just pull the material forward, pull it nice and tight, push it backwards, and pinch it with your thumb and index, and then do a wrap. And that will give you that first little ball shape. But I like to do this with my dubbing spinner tool, or for brushes. So take your tool, the hook. You could also use a whip finisher, which I don't own actually, but you could use a standard whip finisher tool with the hook. You can actually take the material, put your dubbing spinner tool on there, switch hands, and then you're going to pull it tight, push down on the top of it with your finger. You don't want these loops to be very big. Ideally, they're fairly small. Give it 1 loose wrap, reposition, and then 2, 3. Just 3 wraps is usually all you need. Give it a nice firm pull, and that'll give you a nice small first loop. You want this fly to be, you don't want those loops to get out of control unless you're fishing really big, dirty water. Sometimes it's nice to have the size on your side. But then you're going to take the material that you've folded forward, fold it back, do 3 turns forward, and repeat the process. Each time, maybe adding a little bit of size to your loops, but again, don't make them too big. And then, so you pull it back nice and tight, push down on the top with your finger, lock it in. Get the material out of the way. Stuff can be kind of hard to work with. It sticks to every little bit of dry skin you have. And I'm not gonna lie, being out on the river often, hands often always chapped. All right, and then pull forward again, 3 or 4 wraps. We're just gonna do this down the fly. Is that making sense for everybody so far?
That's a great tip with that tool you have there to create the loops that way. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it makes it nice and tight. And again, durability is key. I mean, I'm going to lose a lot of these any given day, but I find if I do it this way, they get really nice, small, tight, dense loops, and it helps the sink rate.
You're mentioning about guide flies can be fast and effective and pretty cheap as well. That's, I think, lots of factors there. When I was guiding, I had a client lose about 32 flies in a day. So that was a pretty hefty one in my boxes and on my budget as well. So having those to be able to turn out quickly and cheaply as well, that's a huge point there for these flies.
Yeah, but like you said, you know, they need to be effective too, right? Like that's the thing. There's lots of quick flies out there that just don't really work. So
yeah,
you eventually narrow them down. What really works well for you and is quick and easy. Once we get to that last loop, we're at the hook eye. What I do is I take the material, fold it back over the fly, create a head, and then I'm going to just pull that out, put it in your material clip, whatever you got, and then you're going to do a whip finish. I mentioned before, I don't have a whip finish tool. To be honest, I forget how to use them. It sounds funny to say, but I've always just learned kind of using my 2 fingers. This is a tip that I like because it speeds up the process. I don't have to find a tool sitting on my bench. It makes for a really quick, clean knot. We're gonna do the exact same thing as a whip finish tool. I'm gonna take my thread, and I'm gonna pull it nice and tight away from the fly towards my chest. Take your index finger and your middle finger, You're going to place your index finger towards your body, index finger or middle finger towards the fly. Put 2 on the thread, bring the thread directly over top. Like, it's hard to see here. Let me reposition here. There we go. That's a little better. And then directly over top and basically touching your first piece of thread, crossing the line. And then you're actually going to give it a full quarter twist. And that gives you the start of your knot. Pull that up tight to the hook eye. Hook it underneath the hook eye, pull your material out of the way, and you're going to rotate and spin. Rotate and spin 3 or 4 times. Pull it up nice and tight, remove your middle finger, pinch the 2 here together, and slowly pull down. There you go. And actually funny, I broke my thread on that. Normally, I would throw in a second or a third whip finish just to make sure. I'm just going to throw in a couple half hitches because I broke my thread. But there you go. So usually I like two turn whip finishes. Make it nice and tight. And then what you're going to do for the head, you don't want to trim it super tight because you might risk nicking the thread. I like to just trim it maybe the height of one of those loops, and that creates your final little loop there. If I can get anything else in there to help it contrast a bit more. Bright dark book or something. That's going to help it all. But the whole key here is you can see the hook is fully open with nothing blocking the hook gap, and your eggs are there. It's washed out now all of a sudden, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty intense light on that that fly.
I don't know what happened all of a sudden.
Yep. It's back. Maybe too much contrast. Yeah. That's a good point about the hook gap, as we see a lot of fly patterns coming to the shop. We actually reject those, send them back with when the gap is really closed and very, very obstructed. That gap is essential to get a really good placement on the fish's lip on the inside or in its mouth. Maintain that always with all my nymph tying, streamer tying. A big thing I look for is my hook design for that pattern to maintain that gap. It is crucial to have as big a gap as you can within reason as well.
Definitely. Yeah, that's super key. I think I learned that the hard way when I started out tying flies. Even still, when it comes to like Euro nymphs and stuff, when you're tying small ones like 16s and 18s and got a jig hook and don't have the right hook with the right size bead and you're causing a closed off hook gap, I think a lot of fish are lost because of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Not even hooked on that one. Now, in terms of the size of the loops you have for that, so that you said you don't want them to go too big, but you can make them bigger for dirtier water. So how much larger would you make hooks on there or the loops on there? And at what point would you change hook size?
So that you can get pretty big and bulky. Like that's a good size one. That's sized on tied on a size 8. And it's chunky. Like it's probably a size of a dime or something like that. For really stained water. So they're in the middle there. Yeah, like you can really play around with it. I'll show you inside the look inside the one of the fly boxes I carry. This is kind of funny when it comes to steelhead season, how they all start looking the same. But there's a bunch of, they're all very similar, in terms of color, oranges, yellows. There's some really dark oranges up top. There's some whites off to the left. But there's pink, there's chartreuse, there's yellow. And you'll notice they're quite large in the bottom and slowly getting smaller, just for different water conditions. And I briefly touched on the color of the egg, depending on the season as well. It's super important to match the eggs that are in the system. When it comes to late in the fall, if you were fishing, if we were fishing glow bugs that were bright orange in December, when the salmon hasn't been in the river for 2 months at this point, there's no real bright orange eggs, and sure, the odd fish will still pick it up. But I like going to like a white egg in December. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but going from something that's even when it comes to single eggs here, let's just grab a bright single egg. Something that's where's my camera? A very bright glow bug is a great fly for this time of year, September, October, but going to one that's more white or peach color for later in the season is great. Also, I find depending on how close the spawning salmon are to the fish. Like the eggs start to harden really quickly. And you'll notice if you just keep your eye out while you're on the river, you'll see salmon eggs collecting in eddies and behind rocks and on the shoreline. And I don't know about you, Rob, but I've never found like just natural bright orange eggs on the bank.
Oh, never. No, you see them when they're milking fish for like hatchery studies and all that, or studies. They come out super bright orange, but then really quickly, this isn't within like seconds or minutes, they really start to change color. So those really bright colors are great, I think, for those off water conditions. So they pop, they can see, but in terms of like sort of matching the hatch for eggs, really quickly they really deteriorate. And we sell this like patterns that look like dead eggs. They're called. Those are not ones that have that have really buried themselves in the sand or been deposited. They're floating down river. They're non-fertile. And they go off color pretty quickly as well. Like those whites, creams, chartreuses, yellows, they kind of get really sort of, the dead egg look to them. And those are super effective. I find for myself that when the water gets clearer later in the season, even early spring, like those whiter cream eggs, like really light chartreuse, those do super well for me.
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree and support that. And like you said, lower water conditions, more natural colored eggs, higher water, brighter eggs, help it stand out.
Yeah.
Straight chartreuse sucker spawn, it's not an egg color that the fish are going to see, but I think just something happens when things get into the UV spectrum below water, and I think the color just that we see is completely different even 3 or 4 feet down.
Yeah.
So it's not so important as to why it's green on the surface. You'll notice that if you've ever done any snorkeling or anything, even in 10, 15 feet of water, when you see this big smallmouth that looks brown, you look down on it, and it's green, or it doesn't look right. And if you were to catch that fish and bring it up, it's brown. Just color dissipates very fast. So.
Oh yeah, I think one of the interesting factors of us is that we love to anthropomorphize on fish, and we love to imagine what they see. But the reality is, until we can talk to a fish and say, "Hey, what do you see in this? Like, what colors do you see? Does this pop? Like, what's going on? Does it reflect a lot? It's UV work. It's all like there's a lot of assumptions there, but really, I do believe that things do change dramatically, and we don't see what we think we see, I guess, underwater, and the fish are really looking at different stuff down there.
Definitely. Should I do a quick little like rigging on how I would fish it on, let's
Please do. Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Yeah.
So like I was saying before, one of the main rivers I guide on in the fall, just because I love it and it's a great experience for my clients, is the Big Head River down in Meaford. Awesome river, challenging river, because it doesn't look like many other steelhead rivers we have in Ontario. It looks a lot more like a trout stream, and I think that's to the benefit of the fly angler. It can be very busy. The pools can be pretty busy on a weekend, but there's kilometers and kilometers of pocket water that everybody walks past because it's not a pool. Anybody that's been out with me on the Big Head will attest that, we do a lot of even sight fishing behind these tiny little rocks where these fish just holding in there because whether they've been pressured out of the pool or they're on their way moving up. And you know what? They have to go through the shallow water to access the big, deep, comfortable pools. So and I find the fish are often quite ready. They're quite aggressive, quite ready to eat when they're in that water that's 2 to 3 feet deep. I'm not talking about 6 inches of water. It's just not 10 feet deep, like a lot of float anglers are used to doing. So there's 2 ways you can fish for them, and in pocket water, I shouldn't say there's 2 ways. There's 2 ways to nymph for them that I like to do. And in the pocket water, I really have been experimenting with the European nymphing rig for steelhead, which is not something you'd hear in many areas of the world, especially our western province or the western coast of the US. But in the water that we have and the fish that we have, it works extremely well. When it comes to starting off the rig, I'm a big fan of making sure you've got the right tippet. A lot of people Euro nymph with very fine tippet to help the fly sink, right? You're using a single 3 millimeter bead or whatever, 2.5 mil bead, and you need that 6 or 7x tippet to get down, or even smaller. The problem is these fish can get 10, 12 pounds or bigger. And you just, it's not great to play a big fish on light gear, just like it would be annoying to break them all off. So I like to start, I think the lightest I fish for steelhead now is 6 pound. And let's be honest, the 6 pound Drennan is a little bit stronger than 6 pound. I think a lot of people would agree. I think it's closer to 8. but I would fish even like 10. I fished in heavy current. I fished straight, 10 pound, like 0x without an issue. I think a lot of people think you have to go quite small because steelhead are line shy or tippet shy, and that can be true at times for sure. But when it's in that fast water, there's a lot of turbulence. You're going to be using split shot to get down. We're not relying on the density of the fly always. Some flies, I'll be fair, I do tie a single egg with a tungsten bead, a 4 mil tungsten bead, and that does give you that direct Euro-nymphing contact. But most of the time, I like fishing a tandem rig with 2 different egg patterns, or egg pattern and a worm pattern, stonefly pattern, or white death, like whatever I'm going to show here. So the first things first, you're going to take off a length of your tippet, and what you're going to do. So I usually just do 1 full arm pull, and that'll give me about my height, so about 6 feet to start. That will give me enough, to give my flies about 1.5 feet of separation, while being able to nymph runs down to about 6 feet deep in slow water, or the average depth of pocket water, which is that 2 to 4 feet of water, quite comfortably without adding on more tippet. To tie my dropper, it's going to be, maybe I should grab like a brighter line, actually.
If you could, yeah, it's pretty hard to see. Yeah,
I use 6 pound fluorocarbon, but let's use my running or my leader line that I use for Euro nymphing. I really like any of the fluorescent float fishing lines. So like the Raven 15 pound main line is good. Some people I've used, this is my favorite cider, by the way. But I use this straight. I just like the 15 pound. It gives me a little bit more, maybe more mass or control behind it when I'm stripping in and trying to maintain line tension, especially with a tandem rig, 2 big wet egg flies and split shot. When I'm trout fishing, I like to use like 10 or 12 pound, but for steel, I like going up a bit. So let's just pull off an arm pull here. This will hopefully stand out a little bit better on camera. That's better.
Yep,
okay.
Way better. Yep.
So what I'm going to do to tie my dropper, there's 2 ways, there's multiple ways you can do it. You can do you can cut off about 1.5 feet and then do a blood knot in your finger here. You can do uni to uni knot, tie off 1 tag. My favorite, and again, speed is always kind of a priority, fixing tangles, and you want to get down there quick. So I like just doing a triple surgeon knot, and then you clip it, not right at where you would normally clip it. You give it. Actually, I'll show you instead of describing. So let's get it in the center here. So I've doubled over, like pulled myself out about 2 feet of line here. Or fold it over and grab the tag end and pinch it against the running line. What you're gonna do for your triple surgeons is really simple. It's like 3 kind of overhand knots. It's awesome. So speed and efficiency is important. So you create that loop, pull it kind of tight, and then you're gonna feed your tag end, or if you want to call it your tag end, through 3 times. And this works extremely well for any river that you can fish tandem flies on for trout as well, which, to be real, the credit and the grand can't really do it in most of our trout areas. But when you do have the opportunity on some rivers, it's always effective. So you end up with this doubled up kind of triple overhand knot. With all knots, you always want to give it a little bit of moisture so it doesn't, you don't damage the line. So stick it in your mouth quickly, or stick it in the river, and you're slowly going to pull. The important part is all 4 ends. You've ended up with 2 ends on this side, 2 ends on this side. Pull them all slowly at the same time and get them seated down nicely. What you're going to be left with is the line you started with to a knot in the middle there and with a loop. So a lot of people are like, well, how the heck do I then tie on the fly? Like, that's weird. You're actually going to trim that little tag end that you see there. And then you're going to take this loop and you're going to pull about 4 to 6 inches away, and you're going to trim that, which now gives you a dropper knot and then your point for your point fly. So really effective way and quick way to tie it on. And a triple surgeons is a pretty strong knot. I don't know the strength for all of them off the top of my head, but it's one of the top ones. Works very, very well, all the way down to small tippet. Then what I like to do is I'm going to take one of the sucker spawns we tied, and I almost always fish the sucker spawn on the point.
Why is that? You have a reason why?
That's a good question. I think I like the way it kind of dances around in the current. I think that's mostly why. I think whatever fly you put on the point, because I'm going to put the split shot closer to the dropper, is going to dance a bit more. So what you put on there, it's just a different way. And because there's that natural buoyancy in the McFly foam, I really like that. So we're just gonna tie that on with a simple clinch knot, pull that nice and tight. So now you've got your sucker spawn down below. I'm gonna take a single egg. And, I usually start the day fishing tandem. Often we fish tandem all day, but there's plenty of times where you start realizing, okay, it's just they're taking the one fly, and then I just switch up to a single fly. You lose less flies on your snags and all that kind of stuff. So
You find it really fast that multiple currents, you like to fish one fly or two flies in those scenarios. Say in the beginning, with all the pocket water, all the tumble, like all the very short drifts, you think one fly fish is better or two flies?
yeah, I like the ability for two flies to show the fish two different options, but I will say that I think one fly fish is better. I think you have more control over it. You can put it right where you want it. You can lift it up, you can drop it, all that kind of stuff. But it's all about odds. So putting more in front of them, I think, is an option. I don't think I'd catch, fishing the upper credit, for instance, for trout, being limited to one fly. I don't think we catch any less fish. I think, in fact, like when I have had experiences, whether, I used to spend a lot of time fishing down in Pennsylvania where you can fish like multiple flies, and Euro nymphing kind of with like where George Daniel kind of made it the American thing. I don't know if I caught any more. I think I actually lost more flies but the cool thing was I was able to figure out patterns quicker, I think, what they were, and then bring it down to one.
Yeah, I think I agree. So I do miss fishing those two flies in some of our trout rivers because you can't exactly figure things out, dial it in, and it's a great way. And in terms of a couple flies, you do lose much more. It's great for a fly shop because we sell flies, but in terms of that, as the angler perspective, you do break off a lot more, and then to go two instead of one. Yeah,
definitely. What was I going to say? The great, again, for trout, it's the best if you can fish tandem fly, one real heavy point fly, one about 1.5 feet up as an unweighted emerger, and you can fish one kind of just below the surface, or even just dabbing it on the surface as your nymph goes through. And tight lining kind of a dry fly, it's kind of funny, but it works extremely well.
Deadly.
So at this point, we've got our dropper, we've got our point fly. They're separated about 8 or 9 inches. The reason why I put such a long dropper on that is I'm likely going to be changing that fly out. It's going to get snagged. It's going to break off. It allows me more opportunity to re-rig. And then you're just going to grab your bag of split shot. Carry a lot of different sizes, but I pretty much fish BB all the time. I don't think steelhead are shy of split shot. It's not a thing that I've experienced. I think when I used to do a lot of center fin angling, and the way you taper and trot your floats and all that kind of stuff, and we put a lot of thought into it to make sure. But once Euro nymphing kind of came on, you can control it through the rod. I think it's less important. I was shocked, and most people are shocked the first time they see how close I put the split shot to my dropper. It's right at the knot, and the reason I put it at the knot is so that it doesn't actually slide down any further. Otherwise it's super annoying. Normally I have my forceps to clamp these on, but I'm just going to use my teeth right now. My dentist probably doesn't like that, but
yeah, mine made a lot of money off me.
Yeah, definitely. So now you've got your 2 split shot right at the knot. And again, if you don't do that, you'll notice if you don't check your rig after every cast, that split shot's going to work its way down, and it's just going to be jammed up right against your fly. And I was saying, I don't think it can be too close, but I think right at the fly is a little close. So giving them a couple of inches away from it allows you to have good control, but yet they don't see it. Now, keep in mind that split shot is the densest part of the system. It's going to be on the bottom, and your eggs are going to be, because they're relatively neutrally buoyant, they're going to be floating up above. A lot of people are looking at this, and that have been out with me for trout can be confused that, like, I talk about never using split shot and just using the weight of the tungsten bead to get you down. And you know what? Those pesky browns and brookies and rainbows, they're really good at spitting a fly out really fast. You need to be in direct contact. With this rig, I find it's not as important. You get it down there, those eggs float around, the fish grab it. You still feel it almost right away, but it is a little bit softer. It's not as sharp of a tap when the fish grabs. But you still have plenty of time, because in my opinion, there's not a bunch of pheasant tail wrapped on a metal hook shank. There's actually some give to this, so it kind of feels maybe real for a minute. You have that split second to react, and don't get me wrong, you're going to miss fish. It's going to happen. I miss fish all the time. You'll never get over it completely, but you do want egg before.
I would say as well is that the material you use has ability to grab onto the fish's teeth as well. So
Yes.
it's going to actually hang up in there a bit more. So that's a huge point. There's a few flies that I tie where I use that material to actually wrap the body. So when a fish does grab, it will grab that material and it'll kind of get hung up for a second more and it won't get spit out as quickly. So that's a huge little point on the material aspect as well.
Great point. But yeah, that's the simple European rig for the leader, or sorry, for the tippet. From there on, I'm sure everybody's looked up European rigging videos and all that. But I can't say enough about the SA new cider. This stuff's great.
It's awesome stuff.
It's like super bright, and it's a triple color, which is nice to have. So you have like orange, green, and then a white section. And I was kind of like, oh, what's with the white? Like I didn't think it would stand out, but it stands out. It's just opaque. Like it just, I don't know what it is. Early morning, late evening, it really stands out. So what I usually do is from my tippet to my cider, you can run like a tippet ring from your cider to your tippet, or a very small swivel. Steelhead like to twist and jump and get all twisted up. So a small swivel is not a bad idea. I use that often. Then to your running line, which like I said, your main leader, just this Raven main line. Got this from you guys. It's super heavy stuff. It floats really well. It casts, it manages, you can line manage really well. And it's got the great thing about having a full color Euro rig is it's so easy to pick up where your cider is. Use Maxima Chameleon. I think that was what everybody used when it first came out. That's what everybody was talking about using, but it's dark brown, and sometimes catching where that went and only having a 1 foot or 2 foot cider can be hard to see. Having that main line, basically a whole length is your cider, makes it easy to pick up in any condition. So yeah, that's my favorite rig, I would say, for fishing rivers like the Big Head. Indicator rig is very similar, but I fish it in different water. I like fishing an indicator in the slower moving pools, a little bit of deeper water. And there's a couple people in here that'll attest that sometimes it's even just as easy to take your like airlock indicator. Like I should talk about those quickly. Like a 3/4 inch size or a 1 inch size would kind of be my preferred. I think 3/4, like I think that's the 3/4. Yeah, that's like probably my favorite all around. The amount of times we get up to a piece of water that's just slow moving and it's hard to Euro nymph, I'll just clamp one of these on at the cider and just basically chuck it out there.
Perfect.
It covers water without having to change material, without changing a whole rig. You don't have to carry that second rod. And you can still, you don't have to mend, it's just stripping in to maintain and then letting it kind of go out as it gets below you. And keeping that tight line, you're still going to feel that grab. But it's nice having that, what would you call it? Like I don't know, well, I guess it's your strike indicator. It's going to suspend your nymphs below it in water. Otherwise, if you're trying to tight line, those nymphs are just going to swing across the current towards you. And that's not very natural.
You get a vertical presentation with the indicator, which is very beneficial for that. Yeah.
And the new airlocks are great. Like the amount of indicators I've lost, and now that these are biodegradable, always makes me a little happy.
Oh yeah, we love them. They're great. Actually, one of the funny points of the features of the new ones is that they actually hurt less when they hit you as well. So that's that's in their marketing material, which is always great to have. I've been hit a few times with indicators by myself or clients back in the day, and it does make a big difference.
Definitely. Cool. Shall we continue?
Oh, sure. One other thing I would like to mention with egg flies is that I think when they are unweighted, they're more effective than a weighted fly sometimes. The way a fish feeds is that they create a vacuum and suck in their food. So if you have an unweighted fly that's really easy to suck into their mouths, it's going to get a little deeper in there as well. So without having that weight on there, it actually will sort of slide in or pop in their mouths, but easier in as well. So I think that's a great point to sort of think about is when you are designing flies or tying flies, how easy is that fly to intake into the fish's mouth as well, which is a point there too.
Definitely. For experts at this, they see thousands of eggs a day floating down the river or nymphs floating down the river, and they go to eat one and it just doesn't come in the same way. They're going to start rejecting it before you even have a chance to feel the bite.
Oh yeah.
I've seen it. I've had clients out where we can watch them move across the current a couple inches and suck up the egg, and they never felt it because they never actually ate it. They just kind of like just bumped it with their nose or inhaled it and spit it out before they could even react. So one thing I almost always start with at the beginning of the day is I don't charge by the hook set. time you think you have a bite, set the hook. If it's a rock, if it's a stick and it breaks off, that's okay. It's really sucks when a fish takes and you second guess, like, I think that might have been a fish, and especially on a fish such as steelhead, which there are days, don't get me wrong, where it can be amazing and you feel like you're not, you can't do anything wrong, but there's more days you're spent cold on a river, wondering, what am I doing wrong? So all those opportunities you don't want to miss out on. So yeah, set the hook. So the next fly we're going to jump into is the White Death. Great pattern for our Great Lakes trout, our salmon, steelhead, brown trout. Let's get it in closer there. Hopefully this one being a little bigger. There we go. So originally, I think invented in like Pennsylvania, I think, on the southern shore in Erie, designed to imitate an emerald shiner. They have a big emerald shiner run in the spring. I don't know if that's why our fish eat them. I have seen shiners in the rivers, but I also think a lot of these fish, especially in the fall, the shiners are in there. They've just come from the lake where they eat bait fish all the time. And also, I should mention, don't get set on only tying this fly in this color combo. With the way the Great Lakes are changing, a lot of the trout and steelhead are actually feeding on gobies often. So like sculpin colors are great, olives, browns, blacks. And you can call it whatever you like, but it's basically a zonker tied simple, and it's super effective. This fly here works equally well on a nymph rig as it does even swung. We catch a lot of fish on rivers that people wouldn't think you can swing. Use the big head as an example. They don't think you can swing it, but a single hand rod, a short head, like an OPST head or something like that, and actually picking your rocks that you want to swing it by, knowing the likelihood of that's where a fish is going to be, it's super exhilarating. You can attest, Rob, a lot of the time when you're out swinging for steelhead or Atlantics, like you're fishing a big pool, you're kind of casting, you're kind of, focusing on your cast, getting all in tune, and then you're just taking 2 steps. You're just kind of covering that water, trying to find where an active fish might be. When you're fishing those rocks, you kind of have an idea of where they should be. So it helps that. I think it helps you identify the likely areas.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I looked at that as I was out west in my guide school fishing out there. When you fish streamers for resident trout, same sort of thing. You're looking at big boulders and spots. So it's very reminiscent of that. These are rainbow trout as well. So you're actually fishing the same rainbow trout, and it's exhilarating. I love it. I love seeing those fish flash and chase a fly. Even if you don't hook up, you see that big flash, and you're like, whoa! It stops your heart for a second. I'm a kid once again. My heart goes through my chest. I get back there, and it's like a slot machine too. Can't leave that rock alone for a while.
Amazing. Yeah, so exactly. It's a perfect fly for that. A lot of Skagit flies and stuff, you'll see that have, taken the Great Lakes by storm. Rightfully so. They catch a lot of, swinging, they catch a lot of fish. It's relative term. But in those small waters, pocket water, they're often tied too heavy. They sink too fast. They're too large, and then that water, it can turn the fish off. So think small. So regardless, this fly when wet gets very, very streamlined into that nice bait fish profile. It's a very simple fly, but many people all over the Great Lakes region fish this fly. And many people I know call it their favorite. Works extremely well on the Lake Ontario tributaries for me. It works fairly well on the Georgian Bay ones. I change it up to olive for Georgian Bay. I think there's more sculpins that they're feeding on in Georgian Bay than there is shiners or smelt. But in Lake Ontario, there's a lot of smelt and herring and small silver and white bait fish out there. So another reason for white, it's like brown trout fishing. I fish limited colors in my streamers because one of my favorite is white because every fish has a white belly. And if you fish a streamer, effectively a lot of the time you're fishing it fast over top of the fish. You're trying to get them to come up from underneath and eat it. I think white's always a fair game. Fair color to start with: white, black, olive, yellow, pretty standard colors. So we're going to start out tying the White Death. We're going to start it out with size 6 mustad 2X heavy streamer hook. I fish a lot of mustad hooks for steelhead. When it comes to trout, I fish a lot of Hannock hooks. I think I lose a lot more flies steelheading. So those Hannock hooks are amazing, and they're so sharp. And I don't fish anything else for when it comes to resident fish, but for steelhead, I find that these are really heavy gauge. They don't bend out. They're effective. They're inexpensive, and they get the job done. So no need to overthink it. The size 6 2XL streamer hook, pretty standard. You can tie so many flies on this hook. If you're looking for, I guarantee you most people who started out fly tying, this is one of the first hooks they started with, tying woolly buggers, tying clousers even. Like, it's just one of those hooks that you can tie many flies on. I know it was one of my first. I probably had 3 or 4 packs of mustad. And this is what just the standard streamer R74 and standard hook. So here we're going to start out with orange thread. This is for the first color. You're going to notice the base of the White Death. It's got an orange butt, tying down the first section of rabbit fur. Just a little bit of contrast to stand out in the water. You can choose to add lead wire to it if you want to help it get down a bit. It's always a good option. I'm going to tie this one unweighted, but just a medium or large lead wire to get it down. If needed, you don't need a ton of wraps because, again, we're going to use split shot if we're going to nymph it. If you're going to swing it, you might want a little bit of weight to help it cut the surface currents. But as you know, most of the time swinging, you're using your tip, your poly leader, or your low tip to get yourself down. Keep the fly up a little bit, keeps it out of the bottom, keeps it from snagging up. So we started on orange, start about just halfway, just very loose wraps.
Could you also use a bead head or a cone head on the fly as well, or would that affect the action in a negative way?
Definitely. I have this old ceramic bobbin that's starting to cause me problems, Rob. I need a new one. I should probably place an order.
You know where we are. Yep. Yeah. Got a few of those.
It's just starting to cut my thread. It's the great thing is, though, it's old. It's like 10 years old, so it served its purpose.
How many kilometers of thread do you think have been through that bobbin then?
Oh man, lots. Yeah. I don't even know. Look, it's been around. Yeah, if it breaks again on this one, I'm just going to change bobbins. So let's just see. I like having 2 bobbins for this fly. All right, there we go. I should mention this is actually 6/0. You can still use the 8/0. I just grabbed the 6/0 Vivus. It was just nearby. Both work fine. We're gonna grab a chunk of rabbit, not crosscut, zonker cut. Crosscut is really nice for wrapping and palmering the body of, say, like a bunny leech fly. But straight cut is all the way. If I do palmer, like there's actually a cool White Death swinging fly, and I'll show it at the end here, just like what you can do to alter the pattern a little bit. I actually will spin a chunk of this in a dubbing loop, and I find it's so much less mass and it looks so much better in the water. But if I'm tying pike bunny leeches, like, oh yeah, crosscut zonker for the head for sure, no problem. So for this, you're roughly gonna want to take your zonker strip and have it extend just to the end of the hook at the bend. It doesn't need to be much further behind it. Any further than that, you'll find fish short strike. And we want to eliminate that as much as possible, but any shorter than that, you don't get as much movement. So it's like kind of a fine balance. Cutting rabbit hair and trying to make as little as mess as possible is a little tricky sometimes. So I like to just separate the two to get to the hide. Just lick my finger quickly and just pat them down, or have a glass of water nearby. I will not put that in my fingers to put down rabbit hair in my bourbon, though. That's not going to happen. All right. So I got this little chunk of rabbit. I'd say on the size 6 hook, you can see it. There's the hide. It just comes to the bend. That's kind of the goal we're looking for. And then straight to the eye of the hook. You're going to split the hair again, roughly where your thread is hanging. This is also a very effective smallmouth fly too. And I actually use it a lot in stillwater rainbow trout fishing, which is kind of funny. Definitely not designed for that, but in a stocked pond, I think those trout can be quite aggressive.
Oh yeah.
Usually they're always quite aggressive, let's be honest. But this is a great pattern for that, great searching pattern. So you create just a nice little tag there of orange. You can kind of see it. It's maybe just a couple millimeters. Try to show up a bit more. Not a ton. There's probably only 6 or 7 wraps there. And then you're going to stroke that hair back. You fold the hide back, and you're just going to tie this forward. At this point, I'm just going to actually do a whip finish and change out the thread color. That's why it's nice having 2 bobbins or multiple bobbins. At this point, I'm going to switch up to black for the front half of the fly up to the head. A lot of emerald shiners have when you look at them, they have a very dark head. It actually kind of, I think it's the most dense part on their body. Like they're such a translucent bait fish if you hold them up to the light. Growing up in Barrie, like one of the main fish we targeted growing up was yellow perch. And we would go out in the fall and the spring with a bucket of emerald shiners off the waterfront in Barrie and just catch jumbos all the time. Can't really do that anymore, unfortunately. There are not as many around. But I remember looking at how much light would just pass through them. It's quite crazy. But the head was just it's quite a bit more dense. I think there's obviously bony structure and whatnot going on in there. So that's why we use black thread for the head. So you're going to start that thread. You're going to work it back to the base of the rabbit hide. And then you're going to take your flat braid or tinsel. I know in the material list I put flat braid, and then I had a mild panic attack after my last order and I didn't order any. So we're gonna use just like some tinsel, pretty straightforward silver tinsel. You know, everyone has it. Good way to manage this stuff, I find, because if you let go of it, it can be explosive on your bench. I put a little like rubber band around, you can see on there.
Oh, smart. Nice tip.
Yeah, and that way you can just pull it off slowly, and once you get to the bottom of the spool here, you just need to kind of work it back up, because every time you pull some off, it comes back towards you. But that saves you from that mess, because it's a mess. It's so easy to lose it all, and it's not an expensive material, but it's just annoying. So, and then it just stays nice and tight. So anyways, most of them come with 2 sides, gold or silver. Often this one is. You want to tie, you want to make sure when you're choosing the color you want, whether it's gold or silver, there is a way to determine which side you're going to fish, and it's tying it in with the opposite side facing you. So make sure that if you want it to be silver, you should be tying it with the gold side out towards your body, because when you start your first turn, you're going to rotate it and it's going to be silver out. And if you want it gold, tie it silver towards you. Little tip. It took me probably too long to learn that as a kid. Why I couldn't get it right. So that one probably saves a few frustrating nights right there for you. But back and forth a couple times just to level it out all the way to just behind the hook eye. And then you're going to start rotating it over the hook shank and away from you. That's important because your bobbin's moving in the same direction. When you go to lash it down, you want it to maintain tension. If you went the other way and then you go against it with the bobbin, I often find it'll start to unravel and your fly falls apart quicker. You can also, if you really want these flies to last a long time, add some ribbing, some gold, silver, copper wire for ribbing to help the body last. But if you use flat braid, Vivis Mini flat braid in like that tin or leaded tin, I think it's called, the silver. That stuff's so tough. I don't worry about rib. Like it's got 6 or 7 fibers that are interweaved and stuff doesn't fall apart. But if you were to use tinsel like this, you could definitely add on a rib if you felt like it. We're just going to palmer that forward with making sure each wrap is probably covering the last wrap by about 1/4 to 1/2. So that way you get a nice tight wrap and it covers all of the thread. And not super important, but you know, when it looks good to an angler, you fish it more confidently. And I think that accounts for more fish because you trust it longer. In order to tie it off, I'm going to throw one around it and then across material and then back around. The reason I do that, it locks it in right away. If you just try to wrap it and let's say your thread breaks or this falls off the end and you've trimmed it, it's a mess. So this is already wrapped around once, and then I do that again. So I wrap it around, throw it around the material, and then back around, and that really makes it nice and tight. And then you just want to trim it short. don't be too worried about it because you still got to create a head. There's a little bit of a tag there you can see hanging down. At this point, you're going to take the remaining rabbit strip, fold it forward, which should be just to your hook eye or just behind. And you're going to wrap it in with a couple loose wraps just to get it started. Make sure you seat your rabbit on top of the hook before you put pressure on it and a direct downward pull. And then to make a small head, one thing I always like to tell fly anglers or tyers when they're starting is tie your head in and then unwrap it like 10 times because you probably don't need that much thread on there. I overcomplicated it. People add too much thread, and what happens is you start to block the hook eye, or you tie your whip finish at the back and it starts to loosen and work its way forward, and then it comes off if it's too much like a cone shape. If you create a nice small head, I find it creates a more durable fly. Less thread, more thread doesn't always mean more strength. So try to use as little as possible. And even as though I've been tying for a long time, I still find myself, especially on small nymphs, or even let's say big pike and musky flies, like often putting in too many wraps and then be like, okay, take 4 off, just to make sure you maintain that good head. So we're going to put in a few here, get it all covered up, looks good. And then maybe just back off a couple just to make sure it's good. Because when you do your whip finish, you're throwing in 4 or 5 more wraps. So that's always something that, again, took me too long to figure out. You don't need to make a huge head. But once the material is covered and it looks good, whip finish again, finger whip finish, really straightforward, cross it over. 1, 2, 3, pull tight, do it again. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So just a double 3-turn whip finish, locked in there nice and tight, and away you go. And very simple fly, but the great thing about it is you can throw it on many rigs for many species. Works effective on river bass, on panfish. Fish this tandem is really fun for like perch fishing. I'll fish this on like a full, like a type 7 or 8 sink line on a 6-weight and go out on Lake Simcoe and like count it down to 20 feet. And then just 6-inch roly-poly strips back to the boat, and like doubling up on 10 to 12-inch perch is so much fun. Like, and they taste great. So that's a bonus. You don't get to keep many fish that we get to target on the fly rod. Just, there's a lot of people chasing trout and steelhead. It's kind of nice to see them some away, but when it comes to perch, I got a soft spot for them. Fryer's pretty good.
Oh yeah, they're pretty tasty. I have to agree with that one.
Yeah.
Now for that fly, could you also dub the body as well? Like, what else can you do to sort of flash it up a little bit?
Right. So you could use a great way to do it would be like a silver ice dub. You can get a little bit more texture to it. You could just dub it on with some dubbing wax and create a dubbing noodle, or you could put it into a dubbing loop and get it really nice and flowy. One fly that I really like for steelhead for swinging, and it works extremely well in the shallow runs, pocket water, because it has no extra weight on it and it's tied just on a single salmon hook, is basically the same fly. I'll show you it, but it's tweaked. So the body, as you can see, it's all ice dub. Looks really good on my side. It's hard to tell from there. So you can see the body's all iced up, very flashy. And the body, the actual fly is tied the same way. Instead of using tinsel or flat braid, you actually just tie a dubbing loop. There's even that little orange hot spot in there still. The head on it is, I also add rubber legs because what good swinging fly doesn't have rubber legs. It's all awesome. Little bit of lateral line, like movement in the current, and dances really well. And then the head is actually the same rabbit, just spun in the dubbing loop and then palmered on 2 or 3 wraps. What that allows for the fly to look like is a very streamlined bait fish with a big profile. Like, I think it has that very smelty kind of Cisco profile that those steelhead have been feeding on in the Great Lakes all summer. And it looks extremely, let's take my word for it, in the current, but it starts to get, where's the camera? There you go. Nice and streamlined. Those
That's
legs,
awesome.
that ice dub just crushes it. I like to think of one other way, because sometimes using a swung fly like a big intruder or a graboid is like flashy, hobo spade, big colors, like it's out there. But when I think of conventional anglers that do really well throwing spoons in the river, I like to tie my flies in similar size sometimes. They don't have to be 4 inches long. So keep that in mind too. A lot of my swinging streamers are 2.5 inches. Some are like 2 inches, like they're pretty small, like a single stage small intruder, or a single stage prom dress, like really small, just looks like a little spoon dancing along, and it can elect some aggressive takes. So this one's not going to be on the tying demo tonight, but if you have questions about it, let me know. Walk you through it. It's the same materials except rubber legs and ice dub to the body, and then on a like a salmon hook, this one's probably like a size 2. Yeah, size 2. So deadly little addition fly. But yeah, you can match the body in color. You can make it contrast. You could use a glow bright floss for like if you wanted a little hot spot off the tail, that would probably look deadly underneath. There's so many things you can do to it to make it a little bit different. So that you can nymph it on a Euro rig, you can throw it under an indicator, or you can swing it. It's a great fly to fish in all types of water, and fish seem to like it. So yeah, cool.
Fantastic.
Any questions so far?
I will be tying some of those for myself, that's for sure. Those look fantastic. The spay version looks dynamite. And actually the funny is, so we brought the black death, there's the white death in the shop as a fly this past, I think, early spring, maybe earlier, but as soon as we brought it in, we sold out right away. And every batch we did get in, we sell it right away as well. It is just an iconic and effective fly for around here. So it really does stand up to all the hype.
Definitely. Yeah, it's I don't know, it's so simple, it just works, and that's the best. There's a few different techniques there to learn that are effective in many patterns. So if you get tying into big trout streamers using rabbit strips, it's the same kind of technique you're using, tying them down, separating the hair, getting the thread in there cleanly. Yeah, should we jump on to the Pat's rubber leg?
Cool. Any questions? Anything for that fly we just finished up there, or should we continue on? All right, guess the next one.
Cool. All right. So let's put one that's complete. I think I have one of those here too. I did. Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to simple flies, this one is can take the cake sometimes. It can. It's great everywhere, and for like every species, and you can tie in any size. I even tie this down on a nymph hook with a tungsten bead into like a size 12 on the Credit River. I'm not afraid to tell people about it. I don't think a lot of people fish stoneflies on that river, as many as we should, because there's a lot of stoneflies in that river.
It's very important to fish those stoneflies. I have a fly tie called the Maystone, which is just like a blown out pheasant tail, and it cleans up there as well. Stoneflies are aplenty.
Yeah, I remember the first time I accidentally learned, like, I thought, you see stoneflies flying around here at home, and they're half an inch long, and then you get out there, and it was almost like me witnessing like a salmon fly hatch for the first time. Like, I was like, how big are these things on this river? Yeah. They're serious. Like, some of them are like 1.5 inches. Like, they're not small. Yep. Maybe bigger. I timed it really well one day with some clients this year on the Upper Credit, and we had an epic day just throwing adult stoneflies, like big chunky Chernobyl ant kind of patterns, and so much fun. You don't get to experience that too often on our water, especially the Credit. It's a great dry fly river at certain times of the year, but most of the time it's very subsurface and nymph oriented, so that's cool. But when it comes to stoneflies, they're always in the water, all the way down in through Mississauga. There's stoneflies down there. Stoneflies are an indicator of a very healthy ecosystem, which is also cool. So if you have them, the water's in pretty good shape. You want to keep it. As for other flies like caddisflies and stuff, they can survive in very not stagnant water, but lower oxygen levels. But stoneflies and mayflies require clean water. So when you're in the lower Credit, right, Arundel Park, let's say, for instance, do a little bottom sample after you fished a run, put your net downstream and kick up some silt in front of it, pick up those rocks, and you'll be amazed, even in like, December or January, how many stoneflies are mixing amongst those rocks. So pattern that I never leave home without while fishing for steelhead, resident trout, smallmouth, like panfish tied small. Like, this thing's just deadly. And I've simplified it too. I mean, it's an already simple fly, but the original has 2 antennae and 6 legs. I don't think it makes much of a difference tying it with no antenna and 4 legs. If the fish can, once they figure out how to count, we're in real trouble.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't like to give them too much credit, so we're gonna do this real quick. So this fly tied on a size up to about a size 6 streamer hook. I'm gonna tie it on that just so you guys can see it a little better than my standard would be like a size 8 streamer or a size 8 nymph hook. But like I said, down to a 12 onto a with an inverted jig hook. If I do real small for like the upper credit, I will fish instead of using like a chenille like this, I'll use like a micro like chenille for the body. This is a medium variegated chenille pattern. It just looks super buggy. Or you can even use like dubbing for the body. It's pretty straightforward. But what it is basically, you know, hook, some chenille, and some rubber legs, or not rubber legs. You can use rubber legs, but the where's the camera? Uniflex floss. This stuff's great. It comes off the spool pretty coiled. It has a lot of memory. So you'll see I have this big piece just hanging down. I have this on my upper shelf at my tying desk, and I kind of just let it hang there just to get the curls out of it, so that you can get straight legs for your patterns. But if you're not careful and you just go like that, it'll just come right off the spool. So make sure you have some tension on it, or you'll come back to your desk in the morning and you've got 15 yards of it just piled up on your desk. That would not be fun. So we put it back to where it lives. The other thing is, if it is coiled, it's not a big deal. Like, they'll straighten out in the current. They're going to fold back. Like, it doesn't really matter. But again, if it looks good to you, you're going to fish it more effectively. So I always like to make sure my patterns meet my quality that I'm expecting. So we're going to start it just behind the bead. We're going to, I should mention, bead on a size 8 and 6. I'm using a 4 mil. This one's like a black nickel tungsten standard bead. You could use a slotted bead too on a standard hook. It doesn't really matter. You pull it tight, or you can use brass beads too. Just if you want to use it with a split shot in the rig, you might not want to use tungsten because it'll get down even deeper and probably into the rocks. If you're fishing it on its own as a point fly, just single nymphing, or fishing it in tandem like we were before, with a small egg fly above it, you can fish it with a tungsten bead. When it comes to, I kind of mark my flies because when you look at them all in a box, sometimes it's hard to tell which one's tungsten, which one's brass, especially if you put them side by side. So you can put them in one row of the box or whatnot, but often what I'll do is I'll take like a different color thread and I'll tie in a couple wraps just in front of the bead, like a gray or olive or something, which is so indistinguishable, fish won't care. And then I can see it and I know it's tungsten, and I can get down a little quicker. You can probably feel them in your hand too, but December steelheading, you don't really feel your hands all that much. So hard to control that. So let's get tie in. So we're gonna work this all the way back to, again, the just behind the point of the hook. You don't want to, a lot of new fly tires will go down the bend of the hook. And I shouldn't say that's never something you do. There are patterns that you can work down there, but generally it's just the thread and not your material, like a chronomid pattern for still water, or even some caddis patterns when you really want them curved for like the pupa shape. But you just want to make sure you have the right hook for that. This one, stop just behind the point. You're going to take off a couple inches of that flex floss, and you're going to tie it in on the opposite side. Now, one way that works, I mean, you can just put it on top of the hook and you can just start wrapping. The problem is, you'll see there it just kind of flicked around and it's hard to catch. If you take any material that's hard to catch, you can grab it in 2 hands, and you can reach your one hand. Like, for instance, I'm right-handed, so my left hand would go on the other side of my vise. I'll grab it and then pull it up nice and tight, and that'll just put it under the thread for you. So now it's locked in. There's no issue there. So it's already basically got one wrap on it. So now you're just going to do a couple more. And you don't want to pull, I find, too tight on this material, just kind of like a squirmy material. It's easy to cut with an 8/0 thread and pull right through it. So if you want to put tension on it, I often wrap just on the hook and then pull on the hook, not on the material. Just also a great tip for squirmies, because you just cut through those things like crazy. Now, in order to get the second tail, I'm just going to fold that one back, and I'm just going to wrap it back and cover them. There we go. I'm going to leave them long for now, because I like to look at the fly when it's complete and just kind of trim it to the right proportions. It's hard. Sometimes it's so easy to cut the tail too short. And again, it probably doesn't matter too much, but to me it does. So then we're going to work forward and we're going to tie in the actual legs of the fly. With the same Uniflex, you're going to take off a strand about 2 inches again. On this side, you're going to throw the exact same technique, throw it on top of the hook, give it a couple wraps, and then just reposition it to the side of the hook. And then you're going to take a second one to create 4 legs. And then on the inside, often you're okay to kind of tie it in traditionally because you're tying it on your near side. It makes it pretty easy. But still, that flipped on me, so you want to make sure you grab it and reposition it. There you go. Now, the biggest pain with this pattern is dealing with all these rubber legs because you're not obviously done. You need to get to the back again to run the chenille forward. So a little trick that I've learned is, first off, I'm going to move this out of the way, pull them forward, and work with my left hand, just bring it to the back of the hook for now. And working with just the thread, it's no big deal, but when you start wrapping the chenille, it becomes a real pain. So put it towards the back of the hook, let them go again. Take your length of chenille. So if you're tying a bunch of them, I find pulling off about 10 or 12 inches at a time is nice. It's a nice length to work with. If you're only tying one, I would say like 3 or 4 inches is enough. Even if I'm tying like 30 of these, I'm never taking like a meter of it and just trying to go through it. It's just too much to work with, except that there's going to be some lost material. It's part of it. You know, it's pretty cool though, sometimes digging through your garbage can. I have a little drawer at my desk here to slide everything into. Some pretty cool creations if you start blending dubbing and stuff up out of the scraps. We'll come up with some cool flies doing that. But with chenille, for those of you that are new to tying, it's basically a very small dubbing brush. There's 2 lengths of nylon or polyester cord or something in there. And then in between it is a bunch of rayon, or this is, I think, probably rayon dubbing, or rayon chenille, that's sandwiched between, spun into a nice tight loop, and then that creates a pipe cleaner like effect. You can tie it just in as it is, but it creates a lot of bulk. The best way to do it is to take a pinch of the end and just kind of pull some of that fiber away, and you'll be left with just the core, and then you just tie that in, and it makes it a lot cleaner. So we're going to pull off a couple inches of thread. We're going to tie in here a couple of turns, nothing too crazy because we're going to cover it all up. And then if you were to just work this thread forward and start wrapping, it gets a mess because, like, even if I rotate that towards you, like, there's a lot of rubber legs going on. It gets quite tangly. So what I'll do is I'll pull those forward again. I'll loosely wrap it forward. And then I actually continue it over the rubber legs 1 turn or 2 turns, let's say, for this sake. And now they're all forward on me. So then again, you can now easily wrap your chenille. Up the body, touching turns. Then what you're going to do, once you get to where the legs are, you just unwrap 2 turns. And now you just weave it in between. 1, pull the front legs back, 2, stretch them. And then in order to secure chenille, it can be challenging when you're learning. Often you just clip the actual material, not the core. So what I like to do is give it, take my bobbin and go around it once, and then actually up around the fly. And then you can pull down and know that you caught it in. Really nice. So you're going to take those legs, reposition them, get them where you want, trim off the excess chenille, brush away the extra material, give yourself a whip finish. And the cool thing about this fly is you can fish them with short legs, long legs. I fish them with crazy long legs under an indicator. Balanced style, like you would fish like a still water under an indicator, or frog water on, say, like the lower Wilmot River, which everyone thinks, oh, there's no way you can fish that with a fly rod, but you can hang it under an indicator and it's just frog water, doesn't really move. And you can actually kind of twitch the fly back with short strips, which is cool. And with really, really long legs, it just kind of dances in the water and it doesn't look natural at all. They still get it. So in order to trim them, I want them to be about an inch or so long. So I'll pull the two legs on one side towards me, cut them about an inch, and the two on the other side at about an inch. This helps you get even cuts. And then the tail, about same length. So, and then I just reposition the legs, and it's, again, another not fancy fly, but does it ever work? Like this thing, you see how easily a little bit of movement, those legs just shimmy. And I think they'll obviously take it as a stonefly, but sometimes I just think it looks buggy. Like it doesn't matter. You know, when you're pulling it through the water, all those legs pull back. It might look like a young crayfish. It might look like a hellgrammite. It might look like whatever. It just looks buggy. And my favorite flies are always flies that can represent many species of insects, because it's great to know when they're on a dry fly hatch, like you can easily after some time figure out, okay, that's a caddis rise, it's splashy, or the mayfly set, you know, the stonefly sometimes look like there's an explosion in the water. But when it comes to like nymphs, like it's hard to identify what they're feeding on. So something that covers all the bases is always nice. Yeah. So those are like my three favorite all around steelhead flies. Again, I would fish this the same way, Euro rig under an indicator, depending on what kind of water is in front of me. What I like to do when I'm coaching people through like reading pocket water for the first time, because it's not something a lot of us have had experience doing. And most of the time, if you learn from somebody who's been fly fishing for a long time, we would walk past that water, fish the pools, you know, fish the smooth runs, is really sit there and look at the pocket, get polarized sunglasses for one. That's probably the biggest tip right there. Cuts the glare, and start to look for just those irregular bottom formations, areas that are no bigger sometimes than the lid of a garbage can. It's just dark, you know, you can't see bottom, but that, even though it's ripping whitewater, under in that dark spot on the bottom, current's probably hardly moving at all. They're just tucked right in there, nice and comfortable. Trout always need, you know, they need three things on average, right? That's oxygen, food, and cover. And the more we can get closer to getting all three in one, it increases the likelihood that you're going to get bit. And you know, often pocket water is found out in wide open areas with no tree cover. But don't forget that the bubbles in the whitewater is actually great cover. Birds of prey can't see them. They're safe. We can't even see them. Like we're sometimes right on top of them. And it's amazing when you're nymphing how close you can get to these fish, and you hook up and you're like, how did I not see that fish? Right there. And what's another good tip when you're first learning to read a river is it can be overwhelming to try to identify all the areas that fish can be. Try to eliminate the areas they won't be or that they aren't. That's a big part of it. You get to the river like the Upper Credit or the Big Head where it's all pocket water. That first, you know, not saying they don't hold in the first 2 to 3 feet on either side of the bank, but if the water is only 6 inches deep, I can pretty much guarantee you, and it's frogwater, that a big old brown or steelhead's not going to be sitting in that water. And then you look at the other side and you cut off that 10 feet, and all of a sudden you're only dealing with a 6 foot section of river out of a 40-foot wide creek in areas. And that's where you really want to focus your drifts. Focus on, while nymphing, focus on feeding lanes. Don't just drift through it haphazardly, placing a cast here and there. Focus on, you know, dissecting that run. I've say to my clients all the time, picture a grid, and your grid lines are running, you know, let's say 1 foot to 2 feet apart, with the length of the river, and then your other axis, your x-axis, let's say, is running the length of your drift. So you've got these really tight lines that are running, you know, perpendicular, that are 2 feet from each other all the way across the fishable water. And then you've got these other ones that are 10 to 15 feet running across the river. And that's when you walk upriver to present to the next holding location. Yeah, just really dial it into that little bit of dark water. Find those bathtub size pockets, size of a car. Doesn't need a lot of water. And some days you'll be surprised how many fish are just holed up in there, especially migratory fish. They're a little nervous, you know. Some of them, it's their first time up a river and they're not sure what's going on and they're schooling up. And if you take your time on your approach, walk, you know, when you're nymphing, often, you know, usually a good way to approach it is from downstream up. You won't kick mud in their face. watch your step, and yeah, present it carefully, and you can get into dozens of fish out of one small hole. I've seen it many times. So and try and get them out of that hole as soon as possible to not spook the other fish.
That's an amazing tip. We talk about A water and B water in the shop. And A water, if you had to hit a river and no one's on it, those big pools are fantastic. But that B water really is ultra productive, especially when there's pressure on those fish and they're finding cover. And Matt's right, those fish leave a blue water environment. They have no roof, essentially, no bottom, essentially. Now they're in a river that's super tight and super small, and now they're skittish. It's a brand new environment for them, so they have to settle down and find that comfort and their needs, which is the oxygen, food, and the cover there. So that B water is I pulled more good fish out of B water on busy days and waiting for a spot in a good pool. So don't walk past stuff. And he's right, those little dark spots, you're like, I wonder what's in there. I always find that folks, when they do hit those, and I was guilty of this when I was younger, and the experience was I would cast into them. I wouldn't set myself up for a drift along them. So I'll be throwing things on top of the fish into the pocket versus setting it up so it drifts by the pocket. And those fish can sort of lean out and feed on those things. Heck, I've caught a few fish, diving my flies into the pockets too, but really setting up for those drifts, really think ahead of those spots, let it flow into those spots and present well that way.
Yeah. That heavy current, it can take 5 to 10 feet sometimes for your flies to actually get to the fishable range, that depth. Some of the water in pocket water is ripping, and two big flies trying to get dragged down with some split shot, it can take 5 to 10 feet. So cast well upstream, focus on the water ahead of you, nymphing downstream. Sure, you catch fish with it. If you're under a suspension device like an indicator, for sure, but your own thing, you're starting to lift the fly, and that works sometimes great on a hatch. But with egg patterns, they don't swim very well. So they're not coming up to the surface on their own. And sometimes people give Steelhead too much credit. They will still take a swung egg pattern, like it happens.
It happens. Hell yeah.
But most of the time, you want to up your chances. Is focus on the drift, really get effective, and dial yourself in on the drift. And then the fly is just secondary. Like get a fly in there that you're confident about, and you're fishing it well. And 9 times out of 10, if a fish is in there and hungry, it'll eat it. If the drift is right. It doesn't matter if you're throwing an egg or a stone fly most of the time.
I would agree with that exceptionally well too, is that it is about presentation, getting the fly to where it needs to be. If your fly is 10 feet above a fish, they're not going to take it be the best fly in the world, the right fly, but it has to be where the fish is. And so presentation first, and then fly choices is extremely important, but it's secondary to getting it where it needs to be. And a lot of folks we find in the shop too, we talk with a ton of anglers, and they're like, I haven't caught a fish all year on here and there. I'm like, well, what's your setup? Like, tell us what you're doing. And we always find that they're not fishing with nearly enough weight. Water is a crazy force, and we have really fast currents. As Matt said, there's these 2 big flies. You have a bit of split shot, you're trying to get your fly down. Well, you need that weight to really pull it down. So don't be afraid to put a little extra on. Start with maybe a bit too heavy, get hung up, take one off, or you start high up, you're not hitting, you're not fishing well, put another one on to get down there. But hitting that depth is a really big part of the equation. I would say, like, the secret is getting your fly to where the fish is. Not that it's a really big secret, but it seems to be sometimes.
Yeah, great points. Definitely. It's often, you said that, it's not enough weight. Hear that all the time. I fished it, all summer. I didn't really get too many fish. Like, you got to get down to the fish, unless you're actively rising or hitting emerging insects, or you're fishing a streamer. Nymphing, get down. Oh, there goes the
action back there. He's up and at it. Being a bit of a monkey, he loves to toss the bed around. So give me 1 quick second, I'll get that test.
That's
Come on. Let's go. Get away from that.
Thanks, Marty. Nice chatting to you the other day. Hope you found it useful.
So any questions, any comments, anything you guys want to chat about and find some answers on? We're here. We can definitely answer them now.
I'm an open book.
Yep. Same here. I think we're too good. Answered all the questions before they even hit.
Rising. No, at least a couple. Cool.
So coming up, we have other fly tires that are be scheduled very shortly and published soon. So jump on those events as well. We have some great local talent. We're working on some big names like Bruce Chard. We're reaching out to Kelly Gallup, and I haven't heard back from him just yet, but we definitely have some pretty big names and a great local talent too. So what's that, sorry?
signing up for the Kelly Gallup one.
Oh, me too. I'll be right beside it. Absolutely. So if we can get him on, that's great. We have also other big names that are coming down the pike. Tim Kamisa has committed to being on as well, so we'll get that scheduled up to you. So looking forward to a great fly tying season. We have a long, good winter ahead. Lots of fishing as well. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the water. Can't wait.
Have a great night, everyone. Thanks again for the opportunity, Rob.
Cool. Good night. Thanks so much. Thanks, Matt.
Take care. Bye.